Recording's good to go. So, welcome everybody to belated episode 9 of A Game of Holes. It's been a really busy March, both for me personally and just in Eve, so I apologize that it took us a little while to get back to this. I think like 4 weeks ago, I was like, Beck, want to come talk about your Keepstar? Figuring that Wholesale's Keepstar was going to be the big thing to chat about. And then Beck was just like, no, we got other stuff going on. And now we're going to go talk about the other stuff. Oh, my video's gone. Where'd my stream go? Rip. Stand by, technical difficulty. All
Is that
right.
your existence service?
Sounds like it might be my internet. Is it my Alright, well, looks like the stream is right. Looks like it's there. People are still talking and it's back. So I'll dive back in. So I've got Veck and Steel Roamer here to talk about really just one thing. Tonight's episode is purely about one and only thing, and that is the eviction of Pause Party from their home system of Hydra. So I'm figuring that this episode's probably going to be a two-parter. Tonight, we're going to have the attacking side, Veck and Steel, representing wholesale operations and Shekelsquad. Seth fell asleep and didn't show up, so Veck said that he'll also pretend to be Seth throughout tonight to cover the whole controls perspective. And at a later date, possibly within the week, hopefully, because if once I'm off to FanFest, it'll be a bit. But we're gonna have the defending side with Keskora, Pos Party, and whatever allies she wants to bring on with her to talk about everything we're going over tonight, but from the completely different perspective. So, uh, enough rambling from me. What I'm gonna do is start with Steel. Steel, do you want to just reintroduce yourself? You've been on the show a couple times, but overall, I'm gonna guess that most people probably know. But why don't you feel free to say whatever you'd like?
I figure at this point everyone knows, and I think everyone hates me too, Exookie. But yeah, I'm Steel Armor. I'm the now ex-CEO of Shekel Squad, IRS. And we can talk about that if you want to. I mean, it's a spicy topic. But yeah, I'm just here because I think I had a lot of fingers stuck in the pot for this one, and I guess our participation in this eviction is kind of like, I don't know, people didn't expect it, or they're uh, seeing us as backstabbers or something. So I don't know, maybe I can explain a bit of why we showed up.
Sure. We can definitely get into that. I'll note both for the stream chat and people watching this later that I let the two of these guys choose their own titles for this slide. So if you're wondering why that's what it says, that's because that's what they asked me to put there. Um, so a newcomer to the show here, we've got Veck from Wholesale Operations. Veck, do you mind taking a minute or two to tell us about both yourself and Wholesale, really? You know, how would you describe yourself and Wholesale?
So, yeah, I'm Veck Abilene. I'm the U.S. Time Zone Director of Wholesale, Premier High-Sec and Merc Services. As far as what Wholesale does, we basically camp the Niarja pipe. We'll sometimes gank freighters off the G to undock, and occasionally we move into wormhole space and sometimes shoot people. But on a more serious note, we started out as like a small group of just low-class wormhole corps that kind of eventually came together. And we moved into the dreaded C4 space, lived there for about a year, and things kind of got stale. So we decided to move into C5 space, where we've been there for about less than a year now. I would say that our primary focus as a corporate alliance is and has always been PvP. Some people think that we specialize in rolling wormholes, which we are very good at, but nah, we like PvPing as much as possible. We do a lot of merc work, not as much as we used to, but that's kind of how we started making a name for ourselves. And I think the first big merc contract that we had was the ISFR eviction, which happened last year. Since we moved into C5 space, we've kind of been doing more PvP and less merc work and trying to just really build ourselves into a bigger alliance and a bigger group. And of course, we specialize in evictions, if anyone hasn't realized that yet. We're kind of known for going around and hitting smaller corps, hitting loot pinatas, and, you know, now for evicting Pause Party. It was just good target of opportunity. And yeah, it was crazy. Looking forward to talking about it. Me personally, I'm just the U.S. director of Wholesale. IFC sometimes. I do a lot of logistics, and for these big ops, I do a lot of planning and a lot of diplo and sort of enter outer alliance workings. But to be honest, it's all of the members that really just, they continue to amaze me. Their dedication towards evicting the targets that we pick and actually like sieging people out for 3 and 4 days straight, and this time for 10 days. So yeah, that's who we are.
That was a nice description. I really liked Cat. I liked the beginning where we talked about Nirja. I think I'm glad you did get serious though, because there's a couple people in the stream that might not have actually understood that you were memeing. So
It's a meme that Wholesale is actually high-sec mercs, but we're not. We're just sort of buddies with some of the ones like VMG.
I mean, I did see you guys in high sec today. So
Just saying, I saw you in the Nirja pipe.
what I'd like to start with is, before we dig too deep into even the op itself, is let's get a bit of backstory. I know that you wrote a very lengthy and really well-written AAR, which I'll attach a link to this when I upload this to YouTube. And I think Steel, I don't know if it was your doing or just happenstance, but I know that there was a Crossing Zebras article that I'll also attach because it's relevant, that kind of covered a bit of your backstory. But if you don't mind, if you don't mind taking a couple minutes, I'd love to hear. We'll just plan on going Steel then Veck for most of these things. Give me some of the backstory about your corp with Pospy, the goods, the bads. You know, what if you were to tell this as a story? What is the lead up that led to you guys deciding that you want to do evict Pause Party?
Is that to me? Like, okay. So we've always, I guess initially, like when we started off as a corp, we were friends with a lot of the groups in W space. Really good friends with Pause Party. I'd say Houston as well, Exooki, if you would vouch that. Sound, you know, we were in the smaller corp club, and like we had been not afraid, but like we kind of, you know, worked together with you guys a lot on stuff. But then, like, I don't know if a lot of people have ever really been in the hot seat of like a corp that goes from being small to big, but things change a lot. And it's kind of hard to describe and explain, but once you get big enough, the way people act and treat you and fight you gets really different, and I don't blame anyone for it. But really what happened with us is that we had noticed a shift in how like our interactions with groups have like been going lately, where we didn't really ever get fights out of people, and if we did, it was, you know, Laserhawks or HK, and the rest of it was usually just, you know, getting dunked on or, you know, getting catballed or whatever, because a lot of people are like, oh man, we can't fight them unless we do these things. And we kind of got annoyed with it, and for a long time we really didn't do anything about it, because we'd always been like, oh hey, you know, we're friends with all these groups, and like, don't worry, it won't happen again. And a lot of people think that like the reason Shekelsquad got involved with this is because I'm an angry person, or you know, Steel Roamer had a grudge or whatever. But the reality, and I think Veck will vouch this one, is that these kind of evictions don't happen because one person's upset, and these kind of evictions don't happen because, you know, 2 or 3 people had an issue with something. It happens because your whole corp has to get behind it. Your whole corp has to have, has to want to come. You don't convince people to put 10 days of whole control in and sieging and moving all these assets in. So what really had happened over time is that like our group just got really fed up with what was happening around us and to us. And when, we had made it known that we were kind of annoyed with it, certain individuals contacted us and said, hey, you want to do something about it? I know just the people. And that's when we ended up talking to Veck and Seth. And that's when, the question came up like, hey, do you want to do this? And I didn't have a reason to say no. And that's really like why we got involved, is if I said no, like to me, there was no reason not to say no. So that's why we showed up. And I think like Veck and Seth were probably a little apprehensive about like, saying yes to Shekelsquad showing up, I'd imagine, because like we were known to be friends with them. Like, I don't know, Veck, you chime in on that one, but like I feel like you would have been a little apprehensive, like, hey, 2 months ago they were showing up on fleets with them, why are they agreeing to come? I'm wondering, like, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but if I want to hand the mic over to Veck now, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, so, I mean, from our end, the whole thing is just, it's a political shit show. We didn't really get involved because, some Bushido was broken, or because, we went into their home and got cap lobbed, or just because they said something mean to us on Tweet Fleet. Like, it was really just, it seemed that the current state of Wormhole space was that everyone hated Pause Party, and just like someone wanted someone to do something about it, but it was just not gonna happen until someone did. I mean, the way it started for us was Seth sort of approached us in December, and was just like, he approached Nika, who is the CEO of Wholesale, and he said, hey, let's form Voltron again, like we did for ISFR, and let's go delete Pause Party. And it's just like, oh, okay, cool. That sounds fun, except Pause Party's kind of one of the biggest corps in Wormhole space. And removing them was, kind of really challenging, to say the least, as kind of everybody saw. But, so, we were like, yeah, I mean, that sounds fun. I mean, we get to form a big mock blob and go shoot people again, like evict like another big target. Like, that sounds great. But it was just unrealistic at the time. Like, really just unrealistic. Because even with, like, Wholesale and Whole Control and bringing VMG and anyone else that we brought for the first big eviction that we did, I mean, still looking at what we could form versus what Pause Party had was just very daunting. So, we pushed it aside. We kind of planned for the first week of January, I think, is whenever we were kind of planning to do it. And eventually, Nika came to me and he was just like, hey, Veck, like, Seth wants to evict Pause Party. He's like, let's do it. And, unknown to everyone at the time, we're still kind of building our Keepstar. And I can't just come out and be like, sorry, we have to put this op on hold while we finish building this Keepstar that's inside of our home hole that no one knows about. So Seth was kind of upset about it because we just kind of shoved it aside without saying much. But what's kind of funny is that over that time, I got a message from someone inside of Shekel from just some random neutral alt. It was about the third week of January, I want to say. And by now I'd already had like 6 people contact me about hiring Wholesale to do an eviction. And so I get this random mail, and he just gives me no information but the JTAG. And so I go plug the JTAG in a tripwire and look up who it is, and boom, it's Pause Party. And I'm just sitting here thinking like, cool, there's one more group of people that wants Pause Party dead. So me and this guy, we had a couple conversations. I gave him a price, and he was actually down to pay us for it, and there's a lot of different things that were said. But then after about like a week or two of speaking, he just did a complete 180 on me and was just like, never mind, I spoke to my leadership. They told me to stop talking to you. They told me not to pay you. They told me that they're going to do it themselves. And I don't know. So I got to thinking, and we got to talking, and it didn't take me long to figure out that this guy was part of Shekel. And so the wheels kind of started turning in my head, and I'm thinking, if we're going to do this Pause Party thing, we're going to need a really strong USTZ. And Wholesale has a very strong USTZ, especially if you can combine our Europeans with it. And then you throw in whole controls like German and Russian branch, and we can literally cover all like 24/7 time zone coverage for multiple days if we need to. But we really needed the numbers in the US time zone. So that's whenever the idea of bringing in Shekel became very appeasing. It became like a, they're going to give us the numbers and the skilled pilots and the multi-boxers and the sabers and all the extra people that we need to actually make this happen. So when I figured out that it was Steele that told him to quit talking to me, I just like, fuck it. I just reached out to Steele. I think I sent him a meme of, it was like a frozen meme. Do you want to evict a Pospey? And I don't know, it didn't take much convincing. We chatted for a little bit, and then after about a week or so of chatting, it's like, yeah, let's do it. Okay, we agreed to let Citadel's 2.0 pass, so that we could kind of get an idea for what the new Citadel meta was going to be. And we picked the early mid-March, and then that's whenever we decided to pull the trigger. And everything just kind of fell into place, honestly. I was sort of concerned that there was going to be a lot of headbutting when it came to like planning and FCing, because we have so many different directors and FCs. But what was really surprising is that the whole op actually flowed pretty well without there being too much arguing over who's in power, who's in charge, and all those things. So, it was... For Wholesale, this was all about just taking moving on to the next big thing. Like, things have been stale for a while. Like, we've been active in C5 space, and we've done a couple small evictions. We anchored our Keep Start, which was exciting, but we hadn't had like any big ops or any sort of big events that sort of like shook wormhole space in a while. We wanted to do something big again. So just the idea of being able to form 140 mocks and fly with hull control again, and then also bring in all these new guys from Shekel that have never done a big op like this, it was just like exciting and fun. And so yeah, fuck it, why not? Like, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say one of the reasons in the back of my head that I said absolutely like yes to doing this was that like we needed to learn how to do it, but we also need to learn how to like not die to it, right? Like getting invaded, like what concerns, what things do we need to cover, what can they do that can make our life hell? Because like Shekel's kind of a newer group, I should say kind of, because like compared to the rest of W space, we're kind of on the same age now, but compared to some of the other groups, we're new. And we just had never done something like this, and that's why, like, when Wholesale says, "Hey, want to do an eviction," the cogs start turning in your head. You're like, "Yeah, like we need to learn how to do this," and these guys know. And the guy who actually reached out to offer to hire you, Veck, he actually ended up taking a break from the game. But I didn't tell him not to talk to you, if I remember. I said, like, don't leak this because we might do something on our own. And I think initially the reason, like, he laid off a bit is we actually started going after their farm holes. Not like, because we were hoping that like we could do something and be like, hey, look, knock it off. Like, this is what happens if you do this to us. We're just trying to be cool, and we'll bite back. And then like, I guess after that, we didn't really, I don't know, like we just figured like, you know what, why not? Like, let's just join in. Let's go for it. Let's learn. Let's fly under some good FCs and get some experience flying and fighting on a big scale. Let's also flex some of our numbers, and we just want it to be it's something big, I guess. Like, you don't read often about a 400, 500 person fight in wormhole space. I mean, we all used to look at the battle reports and videos of like the eviction of Nova, and that was really like the last big thing that was notable and had those kind of numbers involved. And like for a lot of our guys, being involved in this was awesome because it's like they work all this time, they buy all these ships, they put all this money down to get all their slave sets and train all these doctrines and stuff, and then to get to go in and put their name on a battle report that'll get dragged up for hopefully a couple years was cool to a lot of them. Like leaving a rubber stamp of their name on wormhole space. That was one of the big reasons that we came to.
It's meant to instill a sense of pride and accomplishment.
And fear.
Yeah, it was, we've done so many loot pinatas and so many just sort of stale evictions where people just roll over. I've watched dozens of caps self-destruct on Tether on dock. It was actually great. Like all the discipline and training from those previous evictions that were just boring and just lame and nothing but just like, all right, blow up all the structures, clean up all the loot, move it out, everyone gets paid, all right, back home, right? Like, it really felt like getting the chance to put all of that hard work into like a real fucking fleet, like with 100 and something mocks and then an angry cat blob that's trying to kill you. It really sort of like put the entire everything that we've done in Wholesale put it into perspective and sort of just made it all feel like it was all for something. You know, our guys really just. I can't say how proud I am to watch how disciplined and how much of a good job they did, you know, handling such a long siege and such a big fight, because, you know, we've put them through this before, and we've put them through all these, you know, strenuous days of just camping wormholes and bashing structures, and they were ready for it. Like, and the feedback was just overwhelmingly positive. Everyone was just freaking stoked to hop in their Macarial, throw in their mid-grade slaves, just bling everything out, bring all their alts, and just go balls to the walls. And it was just really awesome to kind of see that go together. Same thing with Hull Control. You know, Hull Control has a lot of potential, and Seth is like, you know, their main FC. They really do have a great group of guys, and getting to see them and everything just come together is just awesome.
Yeah, that's, I have to say, like, at least, you know, for the Shekels guys, we had an absolutely miserable 10 days. ExookiZ knows why, and you know, I'm super proud that, you know, they pulled it off and they put in time. I mean, we had times where people were missing sleep before work because we didn't plan on being there for 10 days, but yet our home was being sieged, you know, 2 days before the final timer. So we had people who, you know, skipped sleeping a whole night when they had work the next day just to do Hull Control. We had people putting in so much time and effort that it's really hard to, like, put into words what kind of work goes into these events and how hard it is. But for anyone who's thinking of doing something like this, you might want to sit down and come up with a spreadsheet of times and really think out how hard this can be on your guys. It's just so brutal. We were fighting a two-front war the entire time. It was, oh, you know what, ExookiZ, this is your time to talk. This is your topic.
Yeah,
you gotta
I
talk
agree.
about.
It's time for ExookiZ to speak up some and talk about things from their perspective, because he was there. He likes to pretend like he's just the neutral host, but he was part of this whole thing.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I'm actually saving a chunk of my stuff for the part 2 when we do the defenders portion. Not to cop out here. I just think it would fit in better when I got Val and Kesk up here to talk about stuff that was going on the other end. It will get talked about though, I promise. Something I just wanted to dig into a little bit was, so would you say that Steel on your end, one of the main reasons that you guys joined in on this was, for you, this was about a bit of a grudge and settling a bit of, you know, bad blood that you had between you and Pos Party? I know you talked about, you know, that they'd just been treating you guys shittier. The fights either weren't happening or the fights that you were getting were lackluster. Like, for you, it was a bit about, you know, that immaterial wormhole Bushido that gets hinted at and memed on a whole bunch. Like, they were just pissing you guys off. Is that fair to say?
I don't know, ExookiZ. Let me put it this way. So one of the big things here is that there's kind of a unspoken coalition or friendship circle in the wormhole space. There's a lot of groups that, you know, are friendly with each other and they work together on stuff a lot. And we were part of that for a while. And like, you know what I'm talking about. Like Sound, TDSIN, Pos Party, Shekel were kind of like, you know, we would interchangeably backphone each other, Novak too. And we would kind of show up the content and you know, if one of us was, you know, say trying to kill Kolko, we'd all show up together and try and make it happen. Just because, like, neither of our groups are really that big. You know, I mean, you're big. I'm not gonna lie, your TDSIN's pretty large, and so is Pos Party. But like, we don't really have the independence in some of the other groups. We don't have the capital alts that we can seed in holes to make those kind of ops. You know, like you saw HK like a week or two ago. You know, logged off caps and Kolko's home, and our groups can't really do that. So we kind of just form up like a big subcap lob and try. But us kind of coming to this event, it wasn't just versus Pos Party. It wasn't just, oh, we're mad at Pos Party, we're going to go evict them. It was more like we wanted to say, hey, look, you know, we might be friends and we might be cool and all, but do remember that we can bite back, and like, we don't need your friendship to make things happen. And I know that sounds harsh to say, but, you know, if people think like, oh, you know, Shekel's never going to come after us or do anything else because, you know, they need us to do stuff. That's not true. You know, like look here, you know, working with Veck and Seth, this is our first time working with them. And I'd say it went fucking awesome. I think that was it was awesome, just how well things coordinated and got pulled off, and people were stoked to be part of it. But it's more showing that like wormhole space is bigger than just our groups. There's more going on. There's definitely something to be afraid of, and no one's immune. No one's protected. Like being friends with Shekel doesn't put you on the exclusion list of stuff happening to you. I guess Bushido is the word you want to use, but to us it's more play fair, have fun. If you're gonna tell us about the rules of wormhole space, follow them yourself. Especially because like as a group, Shekel does a really good job of trying to give fun, fair fights. So we try. I mean, like we try not to cat blob unless extenuating circumstances, like for example you bat phone friends or you try to evict our home. Wink, wink, ExookiZ.
By
Wink,
April.
wink. Yeah, by April. But too often, we would have stuff done to us. We would never bite back about it. We would never, draw a line in the sand. That's really just why we showed up. We wanted to say, hey, look, we'll do something about it, and there's repercussions to, being crappy with us. And that's honestly half of my motivation for showing up was that.
So one of the things that I do want to ask, maybe we can talk about a little bit, is what was we watched was it Walking in Stations podcast where, you've got June and Kesk and Matterall, Mac Daddy, just, we got a little bit of idea of what their mentality was by watching that, but I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what were you guys thinking was going to happen next after we sort of lost the offensive on the fourth day, which was the Sunday where we destroyed the two Fortizars, but ultimately got pushed off grid because of just bleeding too many mocks? I mean, were you guys thinking like, okay, cool, we won, it's time to evac everybody, wave the flags, woohoo, evil wholesale defeated? Or, I mean, it kind of seemed like it from watching June and Keskora, but, please leave.
Well, so
I
I
mean, you
mean,
were very quiet that entire podcast. It almost looked like you had something going in your mind, like maybe we shouldn't be celebrating yet. Maybe.
I mean, I was there for really two purposes. One was like Kesk begged me to come on and help out, and I was like, fine. But the other thing was that I wanted to try to make sure that I could keep it somewhat neutral, which I recognize I failed fairly miserably at, because like I told Kess that I wouldn't even come on if she didn't at least get Victor on. Like we wanted to get Steel, but she refused to sit in the same channel with Steel, which continues right now. Um, and
I'm heartbroken.
but because I was just like, I think
Fucking
it's like,
degenerate.
I mean, I made it to the very tail end of the fight. I think chest beating saying we won would definitely have been very premature. I mean, I warned her that unless you guys left, she shouldn't consider it over. But I think that they let the victory go to their heads a bit because that podcast was very, very much so a bit about what you just described. Yay, we won, we defeated. I know you guys quoted a couple points where they were like, please leave. And yeah, I didn't talk much because it was kind of like it was more Kesk's thing. Like, she's become a regular on that podcast as their wormhole person. So naturally, with all this going on, excuse me, Matterall wanted to invite people on to come talk about it. But just as a very clear byproduct of having pretty much all the defenders on as the podcast, it was very one-sided and very one perspective. So. I mean, I didn't have a goal there as much as, like, I guess you specifically asked what was going through my head while we were doing it, and what I was trying to work with some of them behind the scenes is, like, until you guys leave, it's not over, and since it would seem that at least for a very short period of time, you've got the upper hand, you've got whole control, they should be getting ready for round two. That's really easy to say, of course, when it's not my corp that's been up for days on end with minimal sleep, trying this and that. They just got off of a 3-hour fight. So it's really easy to say that they should have done more than they did, but they should have done more than they got done between, they had whole control and time to do stuff for a very short window, and I'm not sure they got everything that they could have or should have done got in there. Uh, I know a couple people have noted that, like, to some degree, and I don't know if you want to, say so or not here, that some people told me that you were actually planning on leaving afterwards until that podcast happened. Is there any truth to that, Vec?
Nah, it's completely false. We were the podcast definitely sort of stoked the flames. There was a lot of members that were poking me. Like our morale was pretty crushed with like after that fourth day, whenever we had spent all this time, we had sort of a lot of us kind of got a little bit too excited on TweetFleet and Reddit. Memes were flying. That's all good fun. Like it just makes it all more interesting. But whenever we sort of had to stand down at the end of Sunday, there was a lot of people that were poking me, just asking like, please tell me that this isn't over. Like, please tell me that we're not leaving. Like, come on, we're gonna finish this, right? And in command, we were kind of salty. We were kind of beaten down, worn out. Just all of us were fucking exhausted. But there was almost like no attitude that we were done. Like everyone was kind of done for, but there was no one saying like, all right guys, it's time to pack it up, it's time to leave. Like we were literally just saying, all right, let's stand down, get some sleep. Like we all need to sleep. Jesus Christ, we need sleep. Sleep, rest, eat, get a hot meal, spend time with your families, just regroup, and then we still have all of our structures. They haven't even, there's a reason that we brought 3 Astra houses and 3 large posses, and then we eventually came back with 6 Ritarus to make it even worse. But the plan was always to be there for a second week. Like we were prepared for it. Looking at the new Citadel 2.0 meta and looking at how many structures they had and then realizing that they put them all on the same damn timer on Saturday, it's like, look, realistically, even if we have 150 Macarials, like good luck fighting a big angry cat blob and then also having to kill like literally 15 structures at the same time and then having to split your fleet, and it just wasn't going to happen. Like we would have had to actually been successful at potting the majority of them out and really just had their fleet down to nothing in order to get it all done in one day. But the push at downtime, the bugged wormhole, I mean, I wasn't there for that, so I'm not going to like comment on that too much. But people just kept getting back in, and then with us not potting people, it just the idea of destroying everything in that one little 4-hour window was just not feasible. So we were like beaten down, but we were always ready for the long haul, and I think we kind of underestimated the toll that it would take on us. But in the end, all of our members, the command structure, the FCs, like we were down. There was really no other option. We weren't just going to tuck our tails and go home in defeat.
Yeah, I mean, at least for like the corp leadership, that was the case. But I know like a lot of corps had member morale. It's definitely a big concern. Like I said, like these things don't happen unless your members are behind it. And like after what had gone down, I know a couple corps are struggling. At least we were kind of struggling internally. Do we keep this up? Can we really commit to this? Can we afford to? We know TDC wants to go for our home. We know that these other groups want to go for our home. An extra 7 days is definitely a thing to throw into the equation. I mean, we were definitely down, and like I think I was one of the first people in the command channel to say like, hey, if they do this, we can totally go for it. But in the back of my head, though, I was definitely very concerned about my home wormhole and if we could actually defend it and the logistics and time frame, because I told people, hey, this weekend, get ready, like it's gonna go down, everyone, clear your schedules. But adding the extra 7 days, I kind of felt guilty, saying, hey guys, we're staying for round 2. Also, your personal life is now defunct. Have fun. I don't know. I think we were in the back of our heads. We were committed to do it for 2 weeks, but I just think when you start reaching, 5, 6, 7, 8 days into it, people are drained. Morale is like, even if you're winning, morale can be down just because it's such a drain on your personal time, your free time, and like money was tight too. People were, reshipping max and slave sets and stuff, and like they didn't really plan on having 10 bill liquid for this, and there's just so much that goes into it. Like we all joke about Tiny talking about the jaded eviction and how long it took, and he always brings it up all the time, but once you do it, you totally understand, why he's saying, holy hell, that was more than we were planning on, because it's so much.
Except Jada didn't fight back.
No, they did. They undocked at the very end and died, but they did. I think.
even like day 8, we had retaken control, and we had we had brought in a bunch of like the smaller groups that were sort of reinforcing us with fresh members, and everyone that had gotten potted out, we brought them all back in, and by then we could feel the shift in morale, and we could tell that they were worn down just as much, if not more, than we were. But even still, trying to get through work and then just refreshing Discord every fucking 5 minutes and just having it consume you out throughout the day, it was exhausting. By the time day 10 came and we finally cleaned up the system, it was just, I think all of us were just completely done for, just mentally and physically burned out. It was, I said this in AAR that I was always ready for the long haul. I was ready for the long siege. I was ready to do whatever it took. But by the time it was over, it had taken a piece of my soul that I had not expected it to. Just between the trying to balance my real life job and then still be a part of this throughout the entire 10 days and keep eyes on everything and keep morale up. And it was a lot, man. I mean, I didn't play for a good week once it was all said and done.
Oh yeah, I think half our corp took a break. For me, right when that was done, it was just okay, we're done with this game for a while now.
But there was something that another wholesale director said. His name is Tornus. We all kind of just, we were all bummed out, oh, we lost. People kept throwing around that word, lost, you lost, we lost. And Tornus comes along. He's like, look, I don't see what you guys are bitching about. You destroyed 2 of their Fortizars, one of which was their main staging Fortizar, which means that now all their assets are in one giant fucking communist stockpile, and no one has access to any of their shit because it's all just in one hangar. And we also destroyed 400 bill of home defense, so it's we didn't really lose. I mean, sure, we definitely whelped a lot of mocks on that day, but we had succeeded in wearing them down pretty thin to where all we needed to do was get some rest and come again at around 2, and that's what we did. And they put up a good fight, but it was not anywhere near as much as what it was for the first 4 days. I guess we out-autismed them.
On top of that, too, I think the thing that probably surprised them the most is how many groups are willing to show up to shoot at them. I mean, I'm not saying, for a lot of groups, obviously it's content, right? Oh, hey, there's a lot of fighting going on here. Let's come for the content. But I don't think, most of the messages I got from people were yo, you're actually doing it. Can we come too? And I know in the first week I turned down a lot of people and said, yeah, I'll keep you posted. If we need you, I'll let you know. Kind of. I didn't want to bring everyone in on it because you don't know who you can trust. You don't know who's saying oh hey yeah, we're gonna help you, and then as soon as we get in, we're gonna go dock and process parties for it and shoot at you too. But definitely during the second week when we realized okay, we need to kill these caps or we're not gonna win. The amount of people who showed up to help was just ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous how many groups were Xing up to come. And I don't know if that's indicative of how people thought of Plus Party or whether or not they hated them or it was just that they wanted to come for content. But in the end, it was massive. What was it, 400 people on our side, Veck? In total, or 465 were on our side, and 300 or 400 were on the defending side. I mean, it was almost reaching 1,000 unique pilots involved, between Saber Alts and people who showed up, and it was nuts. Just crazy. Big and crazy.
So, at any point during the second round, did any of you guys actually stop and look at how much shit you had and actually just ask yourself have we become null set?
We maxed out our fleet twice.
I mean, I'm not making fun of you guys at all, really, just but because I'm also working on my FanFest presentation and I crunched the numbers, and the POSB round 2 was the largest battle regarding number of people that Wormhole Space has ever seen. I mean, I don't think it's news really to say, by the way, guys, Corpse and Wormhole Space are bigger than they were a year ago, but it's actually slightly behind Nova in regards to sheer pilot count, but that's only because Nova managed to get in a third of Brave came into their C6. Not that it mattered, but if we ignore that stupidity that was Nova, really, by a huge margin, no other eviction really has had this much money on grid of an actual fleet, because Nova was Pete's. Nova was hundreds of Pete's just shooting stuff from 200 kilometers, and it was not a good time. I was there, and I can't recommend going back to anybody. Um, but this was the largest concentration of one gigantic fleet ever seen in a wormhole that actually had their shit together, since, Nova was a lot of things, but put together it was not. So I'm just curious about, like, what are your thoughts regarding how many people got blobbed into this one wormhole? Like, there was just so many people. How bad would there was no tie dye, right? You guys had the node reinforced, is that correct?
Well,
Supposedly.
CCP, yeah, supposedly we requested it. Like, I think every FC and CEO had like put in a request saying, "Hey, please reinforce this node." But as evidenced by, personally, like on the second fight, all three of my clients were at 1 FPS and crashing out every time I logged in. Like, it was bad. I don't know if that's my computer performance or just how desynced the grid was. Definitely, if we learned anything, it's that CCP really needs to take a look at wormhole space, because I don't know if this big content is gonna, like the big fights and stuff. I don't know if it was entirely enjoyable. I mean, it's impressive that we did it, but the amount of stuff that broke, like we've all been in like big armor brawls where, something crazy happens. You guys have 50 people on each side or whatever, but like when you start reaching like 200-300, it becomes very, very apparent that stuff is not working as intended in wormhole space.
So do you think they actually reinforced the node? I don't know if anyone actually ever gets an official response from those requests. Do you guys think they reinforced the node?
I don't. I mean, I really don't. There was lots of. I mean, it wasn't anything crazy, but there was small desyncs and small little lag spikes, and there was some issues with, client to server communication. It wasn't anything like super disrupting for me, like it was for Steel desyncing on all three of his accounts, but it was not optimal to say the least. And we had all those people. I mean, we had, like you said, pretty much one of the largest fleet fights in wormhole space, and we didn't experience even a hint of tie-dye, which makes me wonder if it even exists in wormhole space. Like, I kind of wonder if it's even coded to be able to happen there. Because if that didn't do it, I'm not really too sure what will.
That's a good question, because I know over the past couple months I can think of several times where even a grid having roughly 100 people seems to start to have some desync issues. I know Steel, maybe you can comment on like that one.
Oh yeah,
Laserhawks was fighting you guys in your home system. There
dude.
was moaning galore on it. When Hard Knocks and Laserhawks were fighting, and I can't remember if it was Rage or just a random C5, but I mean, I don't think the total grid actually, like, it might have just barely crossed 100 people, but everybody was moaning galore about desync. So it's a really good question, one that I have a feeling that we can't or will never be able to get a clear answer. I will happily go ask CCP at FanFest, but I bet you will get a very unclear, vague response on, does tie-dye even actually apply to wormholes? Like, I've gotten tie-dye before in wormholes. I'm sure some of you guys have other times, but it's never because of stuff happening in the wormhole. It's always just because the wormhole is sharing a node with something in nullsec usually. Like during some of the big keep star battles, like we'd have tie-dye going down the chain sometimes just because apparently. Um, so I'm not. I mean, it doesn't bode well for future wormhole fights of that scale for certain. If after we start to exceed 100 some odd people, the server starts to get loopy. Because without tie-dye, shit just gets real bad. People moan about tie-dye, but I've been in some of the fights that Eve had pre-tie-dye, and they were probably worse. Like, at least in tie-dye, it's slow, but stuff's gonna happen. Back before pre-tie-dye, everything was like, roll the dice, find out if your gun actually gets to deal damage. It was it was a
I
it was a
think
time.
from like the first-hand experience we had with that Laserhawks fight, I was like trying to FC that fight, but the desync made it almost impossible, because like, okay, so when you're in those big armor fights, a lot of it comes down to coordinating your capitals, right? Like, you're trying to shoot Laserhawk stand nations, you're going to need dreadnoughts, right? Because they're not going to kill them before the packs are up unless you have dreadnought DPS, and like it gets all crazy and you get really like into the meta and whatever. But what we ran into was that like I would call a target, and my Phoenix pilots were both sitting next to each other on grid, like maybe 5,000 meters from each other because we warped them together, and I'd call a Balgorn, and one would say he's out of range. I'm like, you have like 80-kilometer range, and the other one's like, he's 5 kilometers off of me. And then the entire time we're on TeamSpeak, we're arguing like, what range is this Balgorn actually at? You know, pretty unaware of the fact that the grid is just totally not functional. And we ended up just wasting so much time trying to like figure out what was happening. And then like Laserhawks, you know, was typing in Tweetfleet like, yeah, like all our stuff is broken too. Like people, I think Zach Genovese had a video where like on his screen, he's like orbiting his fax. But like on our screen, he's like 110 kilometers away, like flying past our dreads.
I actually think
just
that has
so
something
bad.
to do with faxes in general. Not like because you know, I'll take a brief excerpt to talking about when we had a fight with you guys in your home system during your op with POSP. You know, there was a very brief actual fight for hull control, and we had two people that had that exact issue. Like our own recordings show that they were in two different places. Some people saw them like not leaving the hull and getting shredded by your ships, and some people saw them keeping up with the fleet. Uh, it's you know it's unhelpful that CCP will confirm something's wrong but not what it was. Like those dudes got their ships reimbursed, but CCP wouldn't actually confirm if there was actual desync issues going on. But I actually wonder sometimes if faxes is part of the problem. Like as soon as a fax starts being on grid and has any sort of velocity, the grid seems to get fucked. Why that is, I have no idea. You know, maybe it's coincidence, maybe it actually has to do with faxes, but the desync is real.
It's working as intended.
Yeah, just like those wormholes, not spawning.
uh, Alright, so I'm trying to walk through the checklist here. Are there any other big parts of the op that you guys feel that you want to tell your story on? We've talked about the backstory. We've talked a bit about, you know, about how some of the stuff that actually went through your guys' heads when you put it together and how you got in there and a lot of that stuff and the morale. Do we want to talk about ship fits? I mean, we could talk about why you guys chose Macarials. It may be fairly obvious why you chose Macarials, but I guess even if we'll spend a couple quick minutes on it. So is there any truth that you guys chose the timing because you wanted to do this before the Macarial changes?
Kind of.
Yeah, we had never really gotten the chance. I mean, it was a happy like I guess side effect of choosing to do the op right before the update was that we would get to fly the Macarial or like in its natural state, quote unquote, right before they nerfed it. But that was just kind of an accident. We were kind of concerned that they might have snuck in the Macarial update right like in the middle of the op, which would have kind of screwed things up for us a little bit. I mean, we would have dealt with it. We just would have kept our tank and ripped off the gyro. But it was definitely fun because I don't think, you know, Wholesale, we've taken our mock fleet into high sec and shot like a couple studios with it, and I think we've bashed a couple Fortizars, but we've never really actually been in a fleet fight where we're literally alphaing through dreads and faxes and just deleting armor rattlesnakes off grid. So I mean, it was really cool to get to take like the premium meta quote unquote doctrine, which is the Macarials, and just shove 140 of them into the wormhole. I mean, that's another thing to touch on is how much logistical nightmare it was to actually get all those Macarials into Hydra.
We got so lucky, Vic. We got so lucky on that first day.
Yeah, so day one, we had 3 entrances in. There were 2 statics, and they had a road connection, and each of those had a K-space. So we were kind of lucky day one. We managed to just shove like 60, 70 Macarials inside the wormhole, and that was really kind of what we needed because we still spent the next 2 or 3 days with stragglers still just coming in. +1 Macarial, +2 Macarials, +1 Macarial, +2 Guardians, +1 Macarial, +1 Macarial. Like just all day long, Macarials just sort of trickling into the op hole. And it's part of the reason that we didn't invite or let any of the other groups in when they were contacting us. You know, they're like, hey, we want to shoot POSP, like you guys need some help. And, you know, I had to tell them like, look, we've still got like a good dozen of our guys that are trying to get in the op hole, so we can't really prioritize getting you guys in until they're in. And I mean, it stayed like that for a good 3 days, where just trying to get that many battleships into a single wormhole was just a logistical nightmare. You know, you had to have hull control, you had to be ready to deal with them undocking. But as far as, did we do it so that we could fly it pre-nerf? Not really. It just kind of happened that way.
So it was just pure coincidence.
Yep. And honestly, I'm glad. I'm glad that we got to fly it, one more time in the state that it was in. Because I have a feeling that, the material is still really strong, even with the nerf. The only thing that you lose is, you lose some alpha, so you need more materials to accomplish the same thing. But, it's still a viable option. The extra mid slot can really be useful if you use it right.
Do you guys think, with your recent experience and just especially for you overall, Vec, as a professional eviction artist, do you foresee the meta for evictions staying with the material post change, or you think it's going to change?
It's a good question. It's tough to answer that because we've honestly been really concerned about the Citadel 2.0 change and how it's going to affect us. Because, as it kind of showed with Pause Party, if you do it right, you can really, really make it difficult for someone to actually completely remove you. And if you move your assets around, like the whole purpose of us doing evictions is usually because we want the loot pinata. It's essentially how we pay for our keep star was just loot pinatas. And
what Steel paid.
That's all. Yeah, and Steel paid me. Thanks, Steel. By the way.
1.8 trill, dude. That was a lot of farming. Farming.
Look, you guys are still under contract, so don't forget that. But yeah, it's really it's difficult now because this whole bullshit of the defenders get to pick the day that the structure comes out is stupid. Like it used to be, and the fact that we also have to hack all the citadels now. Before we used to be able to just see like a neutral scanner. You kind of wait for a week or two. You let one or two guys collect all the intel, put it in a spreadsheet, and then next thing you've got kind of a good list of when the timers come out, and then you can kind of pick when the best day to invade is. But now, with them being able to pick their timers, it seems stupid to put all your timers at 2100 on Saturday, but Possibly kind of showed that it's actually a pretty good strategy because it's just too much to handle. It doesn't matter how many fucking ships you have. Like, trying to just shoot 4 Fortizars, a Tatara, a handful of Astra Houses and Raitarus all in one little time slot, like plus or minus 2 hours around 2100. So what, you have a 4-hour window to fight off a defense fleet and blow up, 20 structures? Like, that's ridiculous. It's not easy to do. So I think, as far as like, will the material still be viable? It's hard to say. We might still use it. It is still very strong if you get enough numbers, but I think there might be some other platforms, some other battleship platforms that might outperform it.
Bargus.
Yeah, there's been people talking about the cruise Bargus, but it really is hard to say. I do think you will see the material fall out of meta a little bit, though, with its reduced damage.
I think it really depends on where home defense fleets go as well. Like, if the Max stays a home defense ship, like, you bring the ship to counter. We kind of knew what Possibly's home defense fleet fit was. We kind of knew what they had. So, like, we looked at Nicaros, we're like, yeah, this will work. Like, no biggie. And there's also the big advantage of being able to switch out your weapon systems. I know it sounds kind of silly, like, because we didn't really use autocannons that much this eviction, but, like, being able to do that, the wide engagement profile of it, selectable damage, the mid-slot E-war, like, everything about the Nicaros, because it's a Swiss Army knife. Situations change. What you have and what you need is different, every couple hours, every minute. That's why Macs get used. I don't really know if there's any ship that has that kind of versatility besides the Mac and maybe the Cruise Vargas, because, they actually have a respectable armor tank. I think you'll probably still see Materials. I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's too good at what it does. Like RD and Alpha is really why people use it, and the fact that it has a whole bunch of mid slots that you can outrange things, you can track and disrupt them, you can damp them, you can outlocking range them, you can heck, you can even ECM them if you really wanted to, and that's not going to change.
I think people really underestimate the really big thing, in my opinion, that makes the Macarel so superior to other battleship platforms is the bonus to warp excel, decel, and to the bonus to warp speed. Especially whenever, it's not such a big deal whenever you've got them all in the system and you're warping around system. warping at 3 AU as opposed to 2 AU, whenever you've got to warp 60 AU from your staging citadel to the target, it definitely makes a difference. But the big thing is that whenever you're staging them in high sec and you're trying to actually mobilize this fleet, the 3 AU per second versus the 2 AU per second that you get out of like a rattlesnake or like any other sort of like brawly faction battleship doctrine, it's a huge difference. Like when I've tried to move like a 50-man rattlesnake, it's a nightmare. It takes so long getting rattles moved around, and the Macaros are just so fast. That's another good reason why they're just an amazing ship to deploy with, because you can have everyone staging a Mar, and the moment you get a K-space, it doesn't really take them that long to burn there, and a freaking battleship platform that's moving at like cruiser speed.
Circling back to your conversation about Citadels 2.0, would you having just done a large eviction, do you feel that the 2.0 is still too far in favor of the defense?
Yeah, absolutely. I really do. I mean, for null sec and low sec and high sec, like the K space, I can understand like having some protection built in to where it's like, it would be kind of lame if a null sec blob could come in and just wipe out a system or a region within a couple days. But for wormhole space, it's just really dumb. We've always kind of been the 2 to 3 day eviction. Like if you're not ready to defend your home, it can be gone within just a couple days in wormhole space. And when Citadels 1.0 was introduced, CCP took that into account. They're like, okay, well, armor, shield, and structure are all 24 hours, 3 days. Like back then, we thought that was a big deal because we were used to, we'd invade, we'd bash all the posses, and then 1 day and 18 hours, right? That's every single eviction. And then when they, so at most you're deployed 2.5 days, usually maybe 3. But with Citadels being introduced, it was like, okay, well, now we're looking at bare minimum of 3 days, which makes our eviction deployments even longer. And now with Citadel 2.0, it's like CCP just said like, you know what, fuck them, like who cares, like they're just going to have to deal with it, be part of the way everyone else is. So I mean, I really think that wormholers getting to pick the day that they defend is really stupid, and it's really, really powerful in terms of defense, because you really can just drop a bunch of Fortizars, Astra Houses, Tatara, Asbo, just spam structures everywhere, spread out the timers, stack some of the timers, and it really is just, even if we bring 150 Macarils, Pause Party showed that they pushed us to stay there all the way till 10 days because it's just the way CCP has coded it. We can't do it all in a short period of time. We tried our damnedest to do it in 4 days, but it just wasn't gonna happen. Too many things to shoot.
I think the issue with that isn't really like the defenders picking their time. I think it's the fact that like winning an eviction fight isn't about winning the fight. It's just about wasting people's time until your timer is up. Like you have a 15-minute window to RF a Fortizar, but
the hull timer is 30. You do have 30 minutes for the hull timer.
Even then,
that helps a little.
Yeah, and like say we want to implement tie-dye, like why aren't structures following tie-dye times as well? There's just so much weirdness going on with like how long it takes to win those kind of fights that by the time you win the fight, you've lost the timer. Like I guess that's my gripe with it. I can't say that that's like everyone's gripe with it, but mine is that there seems to be way too much focus on just delaying, stalling, put down 10 timers at the same time, and doesn't matter if you win or lose, like you're gonna have 9 of your 10 structures survive because they're stuck fighting you on 1 timer, and then that's it.
Yeah, the first big fight on the structures was I'm pretty sure we spent an hour on the first Fortizar because Seth was having trouble trying to decide, do we shoot the subcaps or do we shoot caps, or when and where do we focus on the Fortizar, right? And so we spent like a good hour just on the first Fortizar grid, that by the time that we blew it up, we've been in fleet for an hour straight, just burning around, like just exhausted and stressed, and we had to go straight from Fortizar 1 to Fortizar 2, and I think that fight lasted about another hour and a half, just non-stop action, because kind of like Steele said, all they have to do is really just stall you for long enough so that everything around you can repair. The extra 30 minutes on a hull definitely helps, but it's still just, I don't know, it's not enough especially whenever you have to deal with fighting. If the defenders can just choose to just sit back and wait, it's really strong from their perspective to be able to just form the blob on the timers and just hope that you take too long.
I think like a good solution to that, and I know this sounds really stupid because people probably will be like, re-intosis's, but like, what if during a repairing timer, if you had like an intosis link on the structure, just pause the repair timer? You don't have to have a DPS cap. You don't have to like split your fleet's guns in half or, do anything stupid like that. Because
I'm very hesitant to just to say that anything that involves intosis links and wormhole space is gonna end well.
Oh, I don't know. I think there needs to be a way to hold a timer without forcing you to put 10 materials on a structure. Because it just seems like that's so stacked on the defender side that, if I want to siege your wormhole, I need to bring enough to siege 10 structures at once, whereas you only need to defend one structure and you win.
On the flip side, I will say that Citadels seem very weak now. The absence of void bombs was definitely felt. I think a lot of people might have let that slip their minds, but it would have been a much different show if we were dealing with void bombs the entire time.
The presence of damage bombs was felt clever, though.
Yeah, for real. Fuck. Yeah, for the people that weren't aware, first fight we had like about 20 people broadcasting for bomb damage throughout the first hour, 2 hours, if not, of the fight. And we were just like the people who were actually getting primary were just bleeding and dying because our Logi. We had freaking 35, 40 man Logi, and they were just rendered completely useless because we had so many people broadcasting for bomb damage. It's a nightmare. I still have bad dreams about it. But I can say void bombs would have just been a whole new element because people would have been broadcasting for bomb damage and they would have been capping out, and that just would have been, oh man, you would have seen a lot of mocks running out of cap, and not not catching up with anchor in time and getting caught because they can't run their afterburner and then getting deleted. It just would have been a nightmare. We would have had to split our fleet into. I mean, what we did before, when void bombs existed, is we would split Logi into two, and we would even sometimes split DPS into two. So that way, no matter, and we'd have the different parts of the fleet in such a formation to where the void bombs can only render about half the fleet useless at any given time. So it's like you either void bomb all the Logi and they just cap themselves back up and nothing happens, or you void bomb DPS and Logi and then you still got another wing of DPS and Logi that are still running. And there's a lot of ways that we got creative with dealing with void bombs, but it was definitely nice not having to worry about it whenever there's 15 caps and about 200 subcaps trying to get a warp in on you.
Do you think that having all of Possibly's final timers on the weekend, specifically on a Saturday, I guess, was a benefit to them or a deficit?
Deficit. No way we would have had those numbers in the middle of a workday. No way.
Because one of the common things that I even personally said at one point when I was talking to Cascas was like, why are your whole timers on a Saturday? I mean, I doubt I'm giving away a secret here for most groups, that the majority of groups that I'm aware of, most of them have their timers on weekdays, because the thought generally is it's easier for me to convince some of my guys to spur the guys, we're defending our home, I need you to pull your shit together and be here tomorrow, and plan around that, than it is for the attacker to be like, I need you guys to just take off a week of work and see how this goes, kind of thing. Because
that's definitely my thoughts on it. That if you put it on the weekday, the attacker has all the advantage because they know that they're sieging you and you don't know you're getting sieged. And most people can't take off of work, the day before. A lot of places require at least 2 weeks, and even then, some people just don't plan on using their PTO for a video game, or a sick day for a video game. I think that having it on the weekend makes sense, but I think that in this case, just because we had so many big groups involved, at the same time, it makes sense for them to have it on the weekend, but it was also why we were able to do good. I mean, because if Possibly was going one-on-one with another corp, absolutely the weekend would not really have mattered there. But
at first, I thought it was just a facepalm moment where they hadn't actually set any of their timers, and their timers were all still just 1800 on Saturday, but they had in fact chosen Saturday, and I think it was at both 19, 20, and 2100 for several of their timers. There's some other groups out there whose Fortizars were set to Saturday at 1800 because they hadn't changed them, but those are particularly bad wormhole corps that we're not going to talk about.
Oof.
Spicy. No, I think that any benefit that you get from putting your timer on the weekend, you have to keep in mind that the attacker is also going to get the benefit. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, because if you know that, hey, we got a bunch of people that have jobs, that have families, and we can't just ask them to be online all throughout the week, but we can ask them to be online Saturday when everyone's off work. I mean, I think that's reasonable, but again, you have to consider that we get the same benefit, to where it's like the final showdown we can get, and they set their timers in that perfect slot where it's like the Russians, the Germans, the rest of the Europeans combined with all the Americans can all form into one fucking mega blob. I mean, we had to kick alts from fleet. We maxed out our fleet both times on the final timers because we had so many people.
The thing there though, Beck, is how many times do you see a corp get evicted by that many people? It's a really rare event. In fact, it's so rare that we're comparing it to one event that was a couple years ago, and we're putting these two side by side. It's happened twice now that such an overwhelming attacking force has happened. That if you assume maybe you piss off one group, or maybe this one group is known for evicting people, I think they're right to put it on the weekend. Personally, it's hard to plan on half of wormhole space showing up on your doorstep, and you probably shouldn't plan for that, because if you're at that point, you've done other things wrong, at least in my opinion.
See, I feel like the way we plan is we plan with that sort of mentality, is that if someone's going to come to evict us, it's probably because we've pissed everybody off. So let's be prepared for the worst case scenario, which is half of wormhole space coming to put us to an end.
Oh yeah, plan for it, but it's.
I mean, any of the big groups, you have this mentality that sure, other people can put up good fights, but for them to actually one-on-one you inside your home is something totally different, right? And so you kind of get, maybe a little bit arrogant, maybe it's justified, but you're not really scared of one group, right? It's I'm not scared of just Shekel showing up. I'm not scared of just Hull Control showing up, right? It's I'm scared of what's going to happen if I piss off enough people and they form a coalition, and then there's 3 alliances or 4 alliances, or even if it's just HK and Hawks that shows up. It's okay, that to me, that's when I think of home defense, and I think possibly fit in this category because they have so many people. But when I think of home defense, I think of that sort of worst case scenario of I'm not worried about pushing off a small fleet of 50 people. I'm more worried about that 150 fucking Voltron that shows up ready to burn everything. Oh, yeah. And I think they didn't really put a whole lot of thought into that with their armor rattles, or from what I read, that was a doctrine from back in the day that hadn't been updated.
But let's put it this way, though, Beck, right? So, putting their timers on the weekend, even on day 7, 8, 9, and 10, we saw most of the hardcore fighting happening Friday nights, Saturday mornings, Saturday midday. Even after a week after the initial invasion, it's still, they had their best chance of fighting on the Saturday against, 3, 4, 5 full alliances in there almost. If they had done it on the weekday, between how many people we had that, had, night shifts at work, or had off for the day, or took off, or whatever, if they had their timer on the weekday, I think that would have been an even more one-sided siege. Just because, we knew it was happening, and between 3 or 4 alliances, we have a lot more people who can afford to be on in those really weird time zones than they did. So I think
we can plan for that too.
Yeah, I think it benefited them here. But I also think that, as the attackers, we can plan on it as well. I'm just saying, in this case, the weekend helped them, but if it was on the weekday, I don't think it would have really mattered either, because we probably still had more people who could have been on.
That's very fair.
So,
I think it's I'm sure it ultimately ends up being different for every corp, and there's a double-edged sword kind of no matter where you go. But I was curious your opinion on that, because that was one of the things that they got teased off a bunch, especially during the first week. I and several other people face palmed when we found out how they had all their timers set up. Some of which worked in their favor, to my surprise, and some of which I still face palm at. So So we're creeping up on an hour and 10 minutes here, so I think I'm probably gonna start steering us towards a conclusion of sorts. Are there big topics that you guys want to make sure we talk about still?
Yeah, the fact that I am a wormholer, by the way.
That's big, big of true.
Also, wormholer, by the way. And so when is FanFest, ExookiZ?
FanFest is the week of April. It starts on April 12th, 13th, and 14th.
I've heard, Exooki, that you're actually bunking with a Shekel member.
We'll be in your wormhole by then. Don't worry.
Okay.
I expect you to give him the spiciest of leaks, you know?
Much spice. Yep. They'll we'll actually take lots of pictures of him covered in woo stickers.
Oh, can you give me at least 2 videos of him yelling "waboo" really loud?
I'll see what we can do. There's gonna be a sticker war though. It turns out the Pos Party also shipped 2,000 stickers to FanFest, so jokes on them. TD Sin has 3,000 stickers, so we'll be making sure to cover up every Ember Sands Ram sticker with the Kraken everywhere we see it. So I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on Tweet.
I actually have a "waboo" sticker somewhere behind me on my nightstand. For 5 billion ISK, I'll send people a picture of me wearing it in whatever body part they choose.
Well, so for all the people that are live viewing, if you have questions that you wanted to hear myself, Veck, or Steel answer, please feel free to throw it in there. I'm watching chat a little more actively than I was at some parts of this. Let me know there. But while I wait to see if anybody's got, oh, all right, we got. Who did your logo, Steel? It is a great logo.
It's one of my real life friends who was like in the corp from day one, like as a new bro. Like we gave him injectors and bought him a Gila and everything. He's currently in the military. He's in Hawaii right now, so he doesn't get to play Eve as much. But his name is Bergmeister. Talon Drasmit in game. He is a graphics artist, you know, outside of the military, and he does a lot of really cool like fantasy like artwork. And the reason that it's a goblin, if anyone's wondering, is because I don't know if you guys have ever heard the joke about Shekel goblins, like the phoenixes that jump into your statics and run all your sites when you're not paying attention.
I've seen
and steal
it.
all your drifters.
It's free.
Oh yeah, dude, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. But that's why we did it, because like, you know, the word Shekel Goblin came up in the fun comms. So we were just like, you know what? Shekel Squad, Shekel Goblin, boom, logo.
Do you consider yourself a real Keepstar CEO, Veck?
Only
fans.
partially.
Only partially. Okay, only partially a Keepstar.
I sexually identify as a Keepstar CEO, but Nick has still got that position. Sad face.
Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed, Vec, by like the fact that we had to give you your Keepstar, and like now because of that we don't have a Keepstar. Like,
Do you
like,
guys
I
have
also,
a
man,
Do you guys have a timeshare set up on the Keepstar, or is it exclusively wholesale?
we have
So-
a couch. We
Yeah,
we're gonna
we-
get bid.
They have the basement of the Keepstar. It's like the dungeon and the annals of it. It's really dirty and grimy down there. Perfect for a bunch of Shekel goblins. But we told them that, you know, if you guys succeeded in blowing up their home, that they could come vacation in the Keepstar for a little bit, since they did help pay for it.
That makes
Steel still owes me about another 1.2 trill, which is going. I mean, he literally had to empty his Keepstar fund to help us pay for ours and to pay for the eviction. And you know, I
Look,
feel
Vec,
bad, but a deal's a deal.
any delay in payment, dude, please direct your frustration to Michael 1995. I was working on getting you the money, and then I got let off track.
Got bonus waived.
rip. So answering Burex there, my next episode is going to continue. I'm going to have a very similar podcast set up like this one with the Defenders. We're going to talk about their perspectives on the backstory, their thoughts through the whole thing, lessons learned, etc. Similar, but definitely going to be a very different conversation with them. I am putting together my FanFest presentation. If you've ever watched one of my FanFest presentations, I have a full-on everything that's happened since the last FanFest leading up to this one's going to be getting covered in my FanFest presentation. I do not know if it's going to be live streamed, but it will be recorded. And if CCP forgets to record it this time, like they did last year, I am going to I've got people coming that are going to record it ourselves, so that, since CCP is 1 for 3 for recording my presentations last year, so we're taking extra measures to make sure that those aren't lost to time. So that's something. And beyond that, once I'm all wrapped up with FanFest stuff, my intention is to resume having the podcast a bit more frequently than I have the past month or so, because March was it was busy. Ask Darth Pepper wants to know about the Pete's. I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be asking about the Pete.
Oh, okay. I think I can talk about that. So we actually had this idea that came up like on our comms and kind of got moved over to Eviction Command. So like a lot of the issues we were facing was just the endless reshipping from that Fortizar wreck. Like the fact that every time we killed something, it came right back, man. It just like, it would just warp to a wreck, and I know you were part of that because you could just grab a ship and come right back to the fight. So like, okay, like we need to kill these pods, we need to kill this light tackle, we need to kill these sabers and stuff that are getting warp-ins and bubbles on us. So we kind of said like, what about slippery Pete's? We can copy HK really hardcore, will be really cool. Maybe we'll make them proud and we can suck their toes or something. No, just kidding. We just figured it was the best ship that we could bring to contest hull control while we were on grid with the Fortizars. Being able to, warp out of a bubble and warp to a hole at range and clear anything that was, preventing our couple ults from holding hull control was big. Being able to pod people, from extreme range, was also big. Being able to go after light tackle, I mean, it just seemed like the right ship for the job. We tried bringing some Beam Legions in, but like, they kind of just got nuked by capitals. And Tamoxa Zero of 420 millimeter full broadside did an awesome job at seeing them. And Out of Focus came as well, because those guys are a lot more coordinated, as a group than I'd say, my corp or some of the other corps were, especially because we had our brains like focused on the Fortizar and they were focused on, doing the Pete's, and they did an awesome job, so shout out to them.
We had this idea that we were going to have a lot of people who couldn't reship into a mocker, that we weren't going to be able to logistically get all these mocks back into the wormhole. So an easy replacement for people to bring would have been just a Pete, right? If we can get like 30 of them, it'll add a whole new element to the fleet fight. That they can clean up pods, they can clean up tackle, they can clean up all the shield stuff that can't catch reps, and really just sort of have free reign over the grid. Didn't really happen that way because everyone just came back in a Mercurial, which I'm not going to complain about because it worked. But yeah, we only had like 10 of them, maybe 12. And, they got some kills, but they weren't quite as... What we had envisioned was like another mock blob and then like a good, like, strong wing of Pete's, and it just didn't end up that way.
I mean, there was a pivotal part, like, halfway through the fight where they actually did get us hull control back, though. I know some Posse Party guys or some TDC guys or Novak guys, I can't remember who it was, went down to the hole. And they had like 5 or 6 ships there. And I remember like I rolled myself out rolling the hole with a yacht, and then they cleaned up grid there and potted a couple guys out. And like in that kind of a fight, every pod counts, especially when you're talking about an enemy that apparently has endless reships in their hole. So
There's actually a good thing that I'd like to just ask your 2 cents. What are your thoughts on yachts in regards to how they go with evictions? I noted both sides use them to try to help to like claim hull control or disrupt the other team's hull control. Do you think that does it still feel like kind of a cheap cop out in regards to like, all right, yeah, they've got hull control. I can't even I can't devote resources or manpower to taking hull control, but I can have a bunch of like almost, risk-free yachts just keep slowly whittling away at their hull control. Does that bother you guys as like a cheap cop-out, or do you think that it's okay?
I think it's a legit tactic. It's also a great sort of asymmetrical tactic because you can. It's one thing if you're holding hold control and everyone's just sitting back watching YouTube, memeing, listening to music, laughing, whatnot. It's another thing if you have to actually actively pay attention because they're rolling the wormhole every 15, 20 minutes with yachts. So no, I think it's legit. I mean, whenever it comes down to it, evictions, it's anything is pretty much legit. I mean, it's all a fight for everything. I mean, we brought in a lot of yachts because we knew that if they got hold control, we would need a way to basically disrupt them from getting people in. And, it definitely works. I don't see any problem with using them.
Yeah, I think the thing with the yachts is like, yeah, you can get the whole roll or crit or whatever, but like unless you have the ability to hold the hole, like you need to kill the hostile rolling ships. So like, yeah, you can go yacht the wormhole, and close it, but like you're still not going to get hold control. You're just going to annoy them. So I don't think yachts are that broken. I think they're annoying and they're really gimmicky, and I'm not a huge fan of gimmicky things, but I guess in the grand scheme of things, they don't really do too much. Because if you have hold control and you have rolling battleships, like the defenders can roll the hole, that's great, but I'm just going to go crit it and roll it on you anyways and get hold control back, and you're just going to spend a lot of time yachting a wormhole really to no gain.
Yeah, it's very hit and miss, and they're very situational, but the situation comes whenever you do need to close, like, it's one of the things that you guys did on, I think it was the second big fight, is you kind of forced us to close the C2, and when that happened, that's whenever the Dread Blob and the whole subcap fleet made a move on the C2, and they actually beat us there. And that's whenever a lot of TDSIN came in, and that's kind of whenever we were forced to land the mock fleet 100 from the hole, and rather than us actually having hole control, we now have to fight you and contest for it. So, I mean, those sorts of tactics are legit, especially whenever you do pick a time that you're going to pull the trigger and try to take hole control. If you suicide a couple yachts, or if you suicide a couple, like, MJD rolling ships, it can definitely push things in your favor if you catch the enemy off guard.
Solid answer. I think what will probably be the last thing that it is a good question that I think I want to answer is Hungover Strayin asked about the wormhole exploit. Probably a little bit of a spicy question. What are your thoughts on CCP declaring that forcing the wormhole to not respawn after downtime is an exploit?
I think it's a poor excuse for their inability to fix a problem. I mean, I understand why they're saying it's an exploit, because it's really broken, and like, from how things went on our side, like where it happened in our home wormhole, it's just because we had cats logged in 24/7 sitting on the hole. Like ExookiZ can attest to the fact that my guys were up all night with cats, and as soon as downtime comes around, we expected you guys to make a push, and we logged back in, and guess what? No wormhole. But I'm not warping my caps off, and you're evicting my home because we knew that you guys had people in high sec trying to come in, and then it kind of just ended up getting bugged, and we had been told by CCP like, hey, this is working as intended, so we kind of just said like, this works, I guess. But it is broken, and CCP does need to fix it, and I think that saying, hey, warping to a wormhole after downtime is an exploit is a very thin line that people can unintentionally cross. It's very easy to accuse people of things. I don't know. I think it's a problem.
I suspect, but cannot prove or verify that one of the reasons that it got moved, like that it shifted, is originally. I mean, there's a lot of things in Eve that fall into this bucket, right? There's a lot of shit you can pull off in Eve that is pretty much an exploit, but they don't declare it an exploit because either it's too hard or it's too easy to do accidentally, or it's too hard for them to effectively track. And I think this one definitely fell into the former, where there's a million totally valid reasons that I could be on grid. As you just cited one, I'm getting evicted and I'm defending my home. Absolutely, you're going to sit all of your ships onto that hole. In regards to them, and so I think, like, to say, hey, like, you're gonna get banned if you do this shit, CCP is generally really hesitant to make those claims or like throw down the gauntlet there, because it's just too easy for people to be accidentally causing this to happen. I think having it happen a second time to another, like, involving so many people, is what kind of forced their hand. because it became a little more obvious that yeah, people are definitely doing this on purpose. Whether or not it was caused intentionally, like it's like we're beyond the point of being like, oh wow, this was purely accidental. Because I can tell you, for what my opinion is worth on this topic, I can assure you that on the defender's side, the first time this happened was purely accidental. Did the defenders end up taking advantage of it? Absolutely. But it was in no way planned. I cannot speak to whether or not a GM reached out to tell us to move off the hole to make the wormhole spawn. Like, I don't know if that happened that round. I know that that happened the second round, and then the GM told, like, I remember on the Shekels end, the GM said that they can ask people to leave the hole, but since it's not an exploit, they can't force people to leave the hole, which might be part of the reason that they decided to move it over to that category. But I know originally everybody was just as confused about what the shit was happening in the very beginning. I mean, I think a lot of people, a lot of people were not used to playing Eve at downtime. I haven't really logged in at downtime since that day in Posby's hole, probably because it was not an enjoyable experience. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Um, but like it was just such a mess. And then um, I feel bad for Australians to deal with this on a daily basis. Like when some of the people were just like, "Oh yeah, wormholes sometimes take up to half an hour to actually even show up." I was like, "You fucking kidding me?" Because I mean, I was involved in that push that happened right at downtime, and I had jumped through the wormhole as the counter was at like 6 seconds. And I actually never got back in because I just couldn't traverse the wormhole from the other side. It kept telling me it was collapsed. But I'm like ranting about it before I went to go take a nap, and people were like, "Oh yeah, that happens a lot," and it was just mind blowing to me. I wish I could say that this is gonna spur actual movement on CCP's end to probably fix this, but if I have to be honest, I doubt it. I suspect what you'll see is that in the future, if or when this ends up getting used, people will file a stock petition to get it raised immediately, and GMs will get involved and say, "Look, get off the grid and let the wormhole spawn, or we'll ban you." And then people will, take that for what it is. But I have a feeling that CCP is going to find that to be an easier solution than investing dev time into this, which is very unfortunate. And I can say that for, I'm sure, our current CSM is aware of this issue and has requested that they look into it. But I don't think we're ever going to hear anything from CCP on whether or not that's going to change. And uh, I have low expectations for that, sadly.
I think from the Shekel side, our biggest frustration with it was just like petitioning it and getting told like deal with it. Like no one even came to look at it, see what we're trying to talk about. We're trying to show like in our petitions issue, we're like, hey, like this is really broken. You might want to come take a look at this. It's really kind of making our type of gameplay that's going on here kind of impossible. And our GM response was like, you'll find a way to figure it out, or just wait till next downtime. We're like, yeah, that's viable. We're sieging a wormhole. Just wait till downtime. No big deal. And kind of when they gave us that answer, we figured like, okay, well, apparently they don't seem to care. So that's what more did we expect. So we ended up like having people like locate you guys, like the location agents, and like kind of figure out where you guys were going. And then we found the wormhole in, and then we just ended up like buying rolling ships in high sec and moving them through the chain. Plus, I think we had the case-based map before. I can't remember, but I'd say, in fact, the biggest challenge we had during this whole fiasco was actually mapping, and like getting case bases shared was actually really hard. Coordinating between that many groups is a challenge. But we got it rolled. It was just annoying to have,
Coalition
a
bookmarks
GM.
wet.
For real. Yeah, it was a challenge dealing with so many different groups and so many different people. Day one, like, was a clusterfuck. It was, I get home from work and there's like 200 people in comms. Everyone's talking because everyone's trying to figure out where to go. And it's kind of a miracle that we managed to get all those people in on day one when we did. And as the time passed, things kind of smoothed out some. But yeah, like getting warp ends, like getting bookmarks, getting people into the chain was just a massive headache. We typically don't map chains at all during ops because spies and such. But there's just times that it's just kind of unavoidable. And then with so many people, you can't really keep all that information OPSEC. So yeah, it was a nightmare. I mean, as far as the wormhole bug goes, I wasn't there to really experience it on either end. I was asleep whenever the wormhole bug happened and the VMit went down. Feels bad, man. But I'm not going to comment on it either way because it is what it is. But it's just really disappointing to see a shitty game mechanic like that kind of like tarnish and sort of dirty up and muddy up what was, a pretty like clean eviction for the entire time, and then all of a sudden there's this bug that each side is kind of slinging mud at each other, and it's like this isn't really our fault. This is just because of bad code, and we're having to just deal with it as it comes.
I think ExookiZ, part of why like some of my guys were like, you know what, like this is what it is in our home hole, and they kind of just let it be, was that having been told off by CCP that like, oh yeah, this is kind of a feature of the game, we can't do anything about it, good luck. We were kind of just like, okay, well, let's show you how obnoxious this can be. And, we log back in and the hole's not gone, and our guys are kind of like, do we really want to solve this? Because according to CCP, this isn't a problem and it benefits us. I mean,
I think sometimes that's what it takes, though. Like, case and nullsecers love to talk about how it's working as intended until Goon Swarm does it. It takes someone showing CCP how broken you can make something with a bug for them to actually invest time into fixing it. Like, I won't get into too much detail, but there was a time when the Higgs rig did not remove the nullification on a yacht. And Wormhole Space overall moaned about yachts for months, maybe even a year, maybe years. I really can't exactly remember the time frame, but there was a couple isolated events of some people showing what you can do with uncatchable Higgs rigged rolling ships to really fuck the game up. And like a month later, CCP patched. So, I mean, you won't hear any grumbling from me about what happened. I think I can completely empathize with exactly that feeling of like, why is this a problem? CCP told us to pound sand a week ago. So, that's how it goes sometimes. But I mean, loosely, I'd like to think that this is probably a step in the right direction, but I'm not really convinced, and I'm not sure that this was a bug that really happened that often anyway. So I might be a stretch to say, yay, we've collectively made Wormhole Space a better place with this exploit notification. I'm not really sure. Optimistically, CCP is actually going to end up working to fix it, but again, I have unfortunately low expectations for that. But so we're crashing the 90-minute mark here, so I think I'm probably gonna try to wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody that came and listened for at any point. Really, our live viewers has jumped all the way up. We peaked at 96, and we're currently at 68. So a lot of people definitely tuned in for parts of this. It took a little while for us to get all together, but I want to give big thanks to Veck and Steel for coming on to talk about Hydra and the work and all the frustrations that went along with that very long, very impressive operation. I hope that in the aftermath of all of this that you guys are proud of what you accomplished, because
that's a hard question, ExookiZ. That's a hard statement to make, man. I'll say it this way, like, just to finish it up, is that, like, I don't have any hard feelings versus, like, Pasta Party members. It's not personal, and I know, like, on Reddit it got really dirty, and maybe I ran my mouth a lot and kind of deserved a lot of the flack I got, but, like, there's no out-of-game personal hate. I saw a lot of people putting comments like, oh, you just hate Kaskora because she's a woman, and, like, that's not true at all. That's absolute garbage. But, I don't want to say like we're entirely proud of it because it sucks to go evict someone that you called a friend a couple months ago, but I think we had to do it because we never really showed people that like we're our own group, and like if you want to play fair with us, play fair with us. Otherwise, we'll do something. I do wish them the best in finding a new hole, and I really wish they would have gone 5-5 because no one would have chased them to a 5-5. It would have been cool as shit. But regardless of that, I do wish them the best of luck in setting up a new home and fighting them in the future.
Yeah, and I guess final thoughts for me is this was the craziest, most insane, most exhausting, the most absurd thing that I've ever done in an MMO was just to bring this many people together. And I really can't say how proud I am of all of my guys that fly under me. That just we ping and just like everyone shows up, they're ready. They don't care who the target is. They don't care what it's going to take. They're ready to start burning. So it's really awesome having a lot of great people to fly under me. And in terms of Seth and Hull Control, I mean, Seth did an amazing job FCing. He was just he was our fearless leader. It was great getting to listen to him just freaking yell at people for 3 hours in Fleet. It was a lot of fun. And then, Shekel, Victor, Steele, Keeper, a lot of the other guys just did a great job. VMG is always there to support us, so it was great to have them there. And, even to the defenders like Pospey and Valesius, like you guys put up one hell of a fight, for real. We've never witnessed anything like that before. We've never, ever done anything on that scale. Never had to fight like that to really just remove someone. So, all the drama and all the memes aside, like it was a lot of fun. I hope everyone involved had fun because it was just one of the greatest things that I've ever done in this game, and I think I hope everyone else had as much fun as I did.
I was actually just corrected via Tweet Fleet. The wormhole spawning bug has actually already been fixed, and it went in the March patch last week. The methods that previously allowed you to stop a wormhole from spawning do not work anymore. So I guess the exploit notifications are already resolved. Wormholes will always spawn, regardless of what you're doing. So I guess I'll have to take back what I said and say, good job, CCP, you did a thing. Yeah. Um, so thank you so much for coming, guys. I'm not sure when the next episode will be. It's gonna depend on Keskor and Valesius's schedules, but my intention is to try to probably get it done this week before we head off to FanFest, and I'll have a part 2 with the defenders. I'll keep Tweet Fleet and everybody in the loop best I can, as when I know with that, and I'll see everybody around the wormhole space. Thank you again, Veck and Steele, for coming on to join us.
Woohoo!